Okay, so welcome to episode 3 of FPCache. In this episode, we'll actually be loading the config so we can continue with the CLI. So I think the nicest thing to do here is to create a subcommand config, and then we can do config init or config show. I think that's going to be the nicest. So let's actually do this first. Let's say we have config here. And what's config going to do? It's going to hold the config action, right? So let's say this action and then config action. So what's this going to be? This is going to be another enum with a subcommand, or however, you have to put it here, right? Like so. So now you tell the subcommand derive that this is again a subcommand, and now we can have the init and show variants. So that's pretty nice. Obviously this doesn't work anymore. So we have config and then action. And then we're going to do a simple match on the action, right? And then config, and on show, we will show config. This function doesn't exist yet, so let's call it unreachable, or actually to do. Cannot move out of this. That's okay. You can say ref action. Okay, so this is now FPCache config init, FPCache config show. Okay, nice. So what we have to do is we're gonna have to load the config, right? So that config equals, and then we need to load the config. So let's create a function that loads the configuration from file, and it's either gonna let's say it's going to be FPC CLI result of an option of config, and the config is from our library, right? So either it's okay and we have a config or not, or there's an error loading the configuration. And all I need to do is fs exists, I think. So let's put this behind a const default config path. It's just this, right? We do need to type it, so static string. Let's put it here, and let's put it here. So if it exists, do something. If it doesn't exist, then we can say okay, no. Right, so if it doesn't exist, then we don't have an error and we don't have a config. If it does exist, however, then we need to parse it using the toml crate. I think we should add to the CLI cargo add toml. Again, you can see we added the toml crate to the dependencies here. However, it's a 0 point something, and anything with 0 point something, fix it to patch version, okay? Because they can do anything they want in version 0. So now we have toml, and now we can just do toml, and I think from str. And we're gonna let the contents be fs read string, default config path. This is gonna be an IO error, but thankfully you can just do this for that. Have an IO result string, we're gonna have a string, so then we can just do this. Let config equals this. And in fact, we can just return it like this. Well, some. Like so, and I like to specify it's a config anyway, just to be explicit. So we're doing something wrong here. Let's see what it is. We need to say okay. Let's see what else. Mismatch types, expected type bool exists. We'll go, of course, we need to do this because this can go wrong at all. Let's see the Trebon config, right? So we can't actually deserialize without this thing having all the serialized attribute. One thing I think we messed up. So this is why you need to do like unit tests. But cache and directory, these two need to match. So let's actually say cache, just cache config. And the cache config will have directory as a string. And I think this is how you should do it. For library objects, you want to derive at least clone and not default in this case. That's up to you. Debug will be nice. This is the least you should derive for your library items. Let's mark these. Let's mark these pub for now. No, we can just keep pub. The thing is now we need to use serde as a dependency in our library, but also in our CLI. So let's create a serde dependency here. Cargo at serde. Features derive. Okay. So now we see we got serde version this, wherever that is. Let's add that to our workspace dependencies. We got 1.0, so let's fix it at 1.0. And let's import it here. Serde, a feature equals serde. Okay, and we'll do the same thing here. So this says derive this, derive serialize, deserialize only if it's serde. And in that case, we do need the imports, right? So use serde. Well, it's gated behind the configuration, right? So config feature equals serde. Use serde, deserialize. Serialize. Okay. Like so. So this will now use serde if and only if the feature is turned on. That's what we're going to use here. So features equals serde. Okay. So the binary can now actually deserialize, right? So we have a result. We have a deserialization error that can happen. That's interesting. Should add that to our errors here. So again, we'll add a transparent error. Serde error from total the error. Okay. So that should now be good. So this will now load the configuration, right? So let configuration equals load config. Okay. So this is now of type option. That is okay. But I don't want to deal with unwraps and stuff. So let's just do something dirty for now. Which is, we're going to match on load config. And if it's none, if we don't have a configuration and our command matches, right? So if args.command matches command config with the action of init, then it's fine. Then we should actually init the configuration and return. Otherwise, we just unwrap. Config. Right, so if we don't have a configuration and you're not trying to init it, you're doing something wrong, right? So return error. Let's create an error. Configuration not found. Something very simple, right? Config. We'll extend it later. Return error, FPCache Ep3 error, config not. I think that's good enough. And if we did find a config, then let's just return the config. So now this is of type config, right? So if you have a config, load it, you're good. If you don't have it, but you're trying to init it and return. If you don't have a config, not trying to init it, you're doing something wrong, right? You're running the program without a config. let's actually add a suggestion. Run FPCache config. Great one. Okay. Now I feel we're almost there. Okay. The formatting is a little weird because the screen is so big, right, for that YouTube video. But now we've got a configuration. And all we need to do is we have the assumption here that we do have a configuration. So if you're trying to init with a configuration, you're weird. So let's add that error. Configuration already exists. Already exists. Okay, so now we can throw this error when the configuration already exists, right? So error, FPCache CLI error, config already exists, and this should be our show config function. Config, let's take a reference to config, and then we can just println. Let's do pretty prints. Can we pretty print? I think so. And like this. Incompatible types, yes, because we want to return FPCache CLI result. Okay. This will be our result for today. So let's actually check